Alright, so let's retrace our steps so that we can understand what is actually going on here. The user will say, I want to buy a bouquet, and you will notice that, well, it looks like the old contexts are still active, so I'm going to just reset them and start again. I want to buy a bouquet, and this is the new set of contexts. So this is what happens when the user just comes in and they say, I want to buy a bouquet. Now if you open the diagnostic info here, you will notice that compose has been set as an input context, and so is bouquet. But notice that we are using the default lifespan of 5. Now what does it mean? It means that this compose and bouquet context, they are both going to be active for a total of 5 steps. That is, for 5 more turns in the conversation, they are going to be active. Well, you might say for 4 more turns, but which means that they will expire on the 5th turn. But in any case, it is going to still be active for a few more steps. Now, when the user says at this point, they say yes, you can see that while yes compose just became active in this step, the compose and bouquet contexts are still active. And if you go and take a look at the diagnostic info now, you will notice that for the compose context, the lifespan has decremented by 1, which is what we want to see. And but its lifespan is still 4, means it's going to still be active at this step and a few more steps. And in the same way, the yes compose has a lifespan of 5. So let's close this, and the next step that the user is going to say is, what kind of flowers would you like to add first? I want to add 5 red roses. And now you see that it has like all these 4 contexts are active. It says, all right, I put 5 red roses in your bouquet. Should I add anything else? And remember that this is the step where we had the problem. This is where, when the user said no, instead of ending the conversation, which is the logical response that we expect, it actually went into the other branch of the conversation. Now, that may not make a lot of sense when you're just looking at the conversation transcript, but it does make a lot of sense once you study the active context and you see the candidate intents through the candidate explorer. So let's go and take a look. If we have these 4 set as the input, as the active context, bouquet, compose, compose, add, and yes compose, bouquet, compose, compose, add, and yes compose, you will see that this means all these intents are candidates. And notice something here. Do you notice that the no hyphen compose intent, which actually triggered, that is the by mistake, right? It actually triggered even though it should not have, but you can see that this intent called no hyphen compose, which has this response, for what occasion would you like a bouquet, is the intent which actually fired. And as we can see quite easily from our candidate intents list, no hyphen compose is indeed one of the candidate intents at that step. So the reason that no hyphen compose is still a candidate intent, even though we moved past that step in the conversation itself, even though we had come all the way here, the reason that is still active is because we have our context lifespan set to 5. That is the default lifespan value, which is usually 5. We are using that value in this particular agent, and that is what is causing this confusion in this particular case. So because we are because that context never got decremented down to 0 and it remains active, that is, all these 4 active contexts are still active at the step, we are having some candidate intents which we don't want to be candidates at that step in the conversation. So the way to look at this is, if you don't use, well, let's put it this way. Whenever you set the lifespan of a context, you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't run into situations like this, because it's very easy for candidates to still be active way past when you will be actually using them or when you will require them to be active, and as a result they will end up turning a lot of intents into candidates, even though you probably do not want that to happen. Which is, in this case, that's exactly the problem that we are facing. We don't want the no hyphen compose to be a candidate at this step in the conversation, but since we used the context lifespan, which is quite long, we used the lifespan of 5. Unfortunately, no hyphen compose still happens to be a candidate intent at that particular step. Now, if you are wondering why this problem did not happen during the first run of our demo, where I did not delete that a single word no from the list of training phrases, it's a complicated explanation. It's something that if you once you think through it, it will start making sense. But the point for that is that when you have two different intents which are both equally viable candidates, that is, the phrase no was a training phrase in both the let's take a look at the flowchart here. So the no was a training phrase in this intent, and it was also a training phrase in this intent, no hyphen compose, no add compose choose. It still chose this intent because at that point the you can say that the lifespan of the context corresponding to that particular intent was higher. That is, the higher the lifespan, the more affinity that phrase will have towards that intent, and that is why the no add compose choose intent was chosen over another candidate, no hyphen compose. In fact, even when you look at this stuff over here, this list of candidates at the step here, right, you see that no compose is a candidate, but you also see that no add compose choose is also a candidate at that step. In other words, it could have chosen this or it could have chosen this when the user said no, but it just chose the right one in the first round because the training phrase was an equal match, and it chose the wrong one in the second example because we didn't have a perfectly matching training phrase. We removed the phrase no from this intent, but it was still there in this other intent. So it thought like, oh, well, this seems to have a better match. So it decided to make this as the actual intent which fired at that step. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can, I guess you can listen to the, watch the video again and go back and take a look at the flowchart and the agent zip file and all that. And I think that once you study it in a little more detail, it will start making sense. But the important takeaway from this video lessons, the series of video lessons, is that at every step of your conversation, you have these 4 things: the candidate intents, the target intents, the fallback intents, and the surplus intents. And the total number of candidate intents is going to be the number of target intents plus the number of surplus intents plus the number of fallback intents. That is where the formula C equals T plus F plus S, that's where it comes from. And you can see that you can use that formula to study the behavior of your agent, and you can use the something like the Candidate Explorer tool to analyze the behavior of your agent at every single step.